The 20th century has made the automobile a massive industry. Today, it is almost impossible to imagine our life without it. But there is one indisputable factor that can change the situation. We're talking about motor fuel prices. If you ask any driver in any country about the prices of motor fuel, you will immediately get an answer. Consumers are always dissatisfied with growing fuel prices. But what will happen if this price exceeds a certain upper threshold? Or even worse, if the reserves of oil, which are used to produce gasoline and diesel fuel, are simply exhausted. This is a fantastic situation, which is unlikely to ever happen in reality. After all, if the problem is mainly in prices and availability of fuel, then it will be enough to use an alternative type of fuel, and everything will be all right. The methane that burns in our kitchen stoves can also be used for cars. It costs about half the price of gasoline and diesel fuel. In this film, we will tell you about natural gas-based fuel. You will know how methane-based cars are produced, and what methane filling stations are, and where gas-powered passenger vehicles and locomotives are used. On the surface, it is a very simple question. How much oil and natural gas is left on the Earth? It may surprise you, but it's not known for certain. There is a range of factors preventing scientists from naming the exact amount, mainly because there are still undiscovered oil and natural gas reserves. We can only say, and very cautiously, one thing. There are fewer oil reserves left than the reserves of natural gas. Under very rough estimates, oil reserves will be exhausted in around 80 to 100 years, while natural gas reserves will be fully used in 300 years. People produce and consume more oil than methane. As a result, oil reserves will be exhausted earlier than natural gas reserves. Nobody knows when it will happen, but it will happen. And at that moment, methane will become the main type of hydrocarbon fuel, which will also be used for filling automobiles. Almost all the large car makers now produce one or two models of natural gas-based cars. Not only in order to match popular trends, although this is also important, but due to their economic efficiency. Gas-based fuel prices in almost all countries are far lower than the price of gasoline and diesel fuel. In some places, they are even 30% or even 50% lower. But why is methane used in so few types of cars? First of all, there are very few methane filling stations. Let's just compare. There are 70,000 gasoline filling stations in Russia. They sell gasoline and diesel fuel, but there are only about 250 natural gas vehicle fueling stations, which sell methane for cars. So where can you go on your methane-based automobile with such a poorly developed infrastructure? If we look at the main European countries, we see a different picture. 130,000 gasoline filling stations and almost 4,000 NGV fueling stations. Of course, the amount of the latter is still smaller. But even in Bratislava, with a population of around 500,000 people, we found 3 NGV fueling stations. How is a natural gas-based automobile filled with fuel? First, you pay. You can pay with a banking card. You can buy some fuel for a certain sum or just completely refill your tank. Or, to be more exact, your gas cylinder. Natural gas vehicles are fueled with compressed natural gas, CNG, under the pressure of 200 atmospheres. A natural gas filling nozzle looks like a common gasoline nozzle, but it's harder, and it has a hard steel pipe. You put it into the tank. You'll have to push it with some force, and press the trigger. That's all. Everything else will happen without any extra effort. If we compare the fuel consumption of gasoline and natural gas-based cars, the figures will be equal. 1 liter of gasoline is almost equal to 1 cubic meter of compressed natural gas. The main difference is the price. It will cost about 47 euros to fully fill this car with gasoline, and just 21 to fill it with methane. In both cases, the car would have covered the exact same distance. Here's the bill. Let's go. In the next part of our film, we will show car production plants where natural gas-based cars are made. You'll see the difference between a simple methane-based car and a dual-fuel car, and the place where natural gas-based trucks are produced. There are now around 18 million methane-based cars all over the world. Who makes them? Almost all the automobile manufacturers do. We went to one of their plants. Since the end of the last century, all the largest car makers have transformed common automobiles into dual-fuel vehicles at the request of their customers. It means that they made cars that could run on both types of fuel, gasoline and methane. But these cars were always custom orders. Now, they are commercially available. Natural gas-based automobiles account for 1/10 of all the products that are manufactured at this plant. To be more exact, these are dual-fuel cars. They can use both gasoline and methane.
What is the main reason why your company is producing the CNG cars?
The CNG cars, they are an alternative to the gasoline cars or the diesel cars.
But what kind of alternative? Money, ecological? What is the alternative?
Yes, both of them. The CNG is cheaper than the normal gasoline or diesel, therefore it's an economic alternative. On the other side, the CNG is very clean in comparison to, for example, gasoline or diesel.
In fact, the engine is not the main difference between common gasoline cars and natural gas cars. The reservoirs for fuel are completely different. Cars which use gasoline and diesel are equipped with fuel tanks, while gas cars have gas cylinders. But since this plant produces dual fuel cars, they have both fuel tanks and gas cylinders. If we look at a gasoline car and a dual-fuel car, we will see that the main difference between them is these additional cylinders for compressed gas. One might say that their engines are also different, but it's just not true. Now, can you guess which of these engines belongs to a gasoline car and which is made for a methane-based car? Well, which? You've got a couple of seconds to think about it. And so, for the right answer, this is the engine of a gasoline car and this a methane-based car, although it's quite difficult to guess because they look quite similar. And what is more surprising, their constructions are also similar. In fact, the only difference is their fuel injection systems. There are two such systems in a dual-fuel engine, one for gas and the other for methane. A pressure-reducing regulator is located near the engine. It reduces the pressure of gas coming from the cylinders. In all other respects, these engines are almost identical. Each automobile makes several circles around the track before it leaves the plant. This is a methane-based car. I was allowed to take part in its test drive, but only in the passenger seat. However, maybe that's better for me. This track consists of sections with different types of road pavement. It includes various road turns and high-speed sections. When you're inside a dual-fuel automobile, you immediately notice that the engine is much quieter. In all other respects, it drives just like a common car. The test drive is complete, and the methane car has passed it very successfully. Thank you. Apart from dual-fuel passenger cars, there are also vehicles that use only natural gas. For example, the Russian car production plant KAMAZ has long produced methane-based trucks. Since the late 80s, KAMAZ has produced gas-diesel trucks, which use mixtures of methane and diesel fuel. In 2004, the plant started producing methane trucks separately from diesel fuel trucks. They are produced in this building. Natural gas-based trucks account for 5% of all the trucks made at this plant. These trucks can use only compressed natural gas. They have no fuel tanks. So really, the only distinctive feature of this methane truck are its reservoirs for fuel, gas cylinders, engine, and a fuel injection system. Yes, but using methane vehicles, we reach the Euro 4 and Euro 5 levels of the European emission standards, which is also important. Environmental friendliness is another feature for gas-based vehicles, in contrast with gasoline and diesel fuel automobiles. No filters or additional measures to purify the fuel are needed. The methane, which is injected into cars, is the same natural gas which burns in our kitchen stoves. While burning, it only releases water and carbon dioxide, and in the most harmless amounts, compared with all other known types of fossil fuels. The gas cylinders are installed at another plant, not far from here, just about 10 kilometers. This is a fully equipped natural gas-based truck. You can notice these gas cylinders at once, and they are not made of metal, but, well, let's reveal the facts in the proper order. Gas cylinders are believed to be the most dangerous element in these cars. They contain gas under high pressure. At this plant, workers do not install traditional metal cylinders, but metal composite cylinders. Aluminum is inside, while the outside is covered with hard braids for extra rigidity. During tests, these metal composite cylinders withstood the pressure of more than 700 atmospheres, instead of the official limit of 250 atmospheres. There are 13 units. This is the standard amount of cylinders that is installed in a gas-based truck. It means that 4 units will be put on the left side and the remaining 9 units behind the cabin. Of course, they can install more natural gas cylinders. It depends on the client's requirements, as well as on the model of the vehicle. However, even 13 natural gas cylinders can reduce the carrying capacity of the vehicle by 1 ton. Of course, this is an obvious complication, but what can we do about it? This is the price you pay for this type of fuel. It takes 1 day to connect the gas cylinders and test the engine. And after it's done, everything is ready. Only the future will tell us which is more cost-effective, to use cars running on gas or on 2 types of fuel. But is there any use of splitting filling stations by fuel type? It doesn't seem so. What could be easier than to do what you see here? To combine an ordinary gasoline filling station, operating with both gasoline and diesel fuel, with a compressed natural gas filling station, and make them into one. The integration of gasoline and compressed gas filling stations primarily consists of 3 operations. They connect the filling station to municipal gas pipelines, install facilities to clean and compress the methane, and finally, install columns with the gas fueling equipment. After that, methane-running cars may refuel in the usual way, as well as cars running on diesel fuel and gasoline. Coming up, gas monsters, locomotives, and sea ships. Where are they being made, and for what purpose? It will take a long time, even if we try to list only the largest methane gas fields around the globe. But let's mention just some of them. For example, fields on the northwest shelf of Australia, or near the island of Kalimantan, Malaysia. The North Dome and South Pars field in the Persian Gulf, the Yolatan field in Turkmenistan, the Urengoy and Yamburg deposits in West Siberia, the Stockman field in the Barents Sea, natural gas fields in the North Sea, the Leviathan field on the Israeli shelf, fields in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and in the East Brazil shelf. These are the largest and purest deposits of methane, while the exact amount of all natural gas deposits remains unknown. In Russia, methane is produced near Sakhalin Island, in the Republic of Yakutia, as well as in other areas long known to be rich in oil and natural gas reserves. For example, the North Caucasus, Astrakhan, in the Timan-Pechora Basin, and on a number of West Siberia deposits among the world's largest: Zapolyarnaya, Yamburgskaya, Yuzhno-Russkaya, Komsomolskaya, and Urengoyskaya fields. The last one is located near the town of Novy Urengoy, named in honor of this deposit. Methane is produced with the help of drilling rigs. They drill the ground, making long wells measuring up to several kilometers to reach gas-bearing foundations. Methane is later processed at specific plants where they clean it, dehydrate it, and separate out mineral impurities. After that, the gas is supplied to cities and localities through pipelines with the use of compressor station chains. But this is only one of two ways to deliver methane to consumers. The other way is cooling the gas to cryogenic or very low temperatures. After the gas becomes liquid, it is transported in thermally insulated containers. This ultra-cooled methane is called liquefied natural gas, or LNG. And the most interesting and actually magic quality of LNG is that its volume can be tremendously decreased. Imagine that this bottle is filled with methane. If the temperature of gas is lowered to minus 162 degrees Celsius, all this gas will compress and turn into a liquid, with its volume being reduced 600 times. If it's heated up again, then it will regain its previous volume. So, LNG is a more compact way to store and transport methane. One cylinder with liquid gas equals 600 of its volumes under normal atmospheric pressure, or 3 cylinders of compressed gas under the pressure of 200 atmospheres. A lot of countries have already begun using LNG to fuel motor transport, and some countries have gone even further. Sweden, one of the first countries which started using LNG to fuel such giant vessels. This is the gas-running ferry Viking Grace. This is not an experimental ship, but rather quite a commercial one. It makes runs from here to Finland and back. The trip takes 10 hours each way, and the Viking Grace needs only one LNG fueling to make the round trip, with gas to spare. But the gas ferry needs to be fueled before it sets off. After seeing the giant Viking Grace, it's easy to imagine the refueling ship looking like some sort of mastodon or tanker or something similar, but in fact, it's just the opposite. The refueling ship is called Seagas. It is a floating, compressed natural gas filling station, but it carries just liquefied gas instead of compressed gas. The gas ferry is refueled while still afloat. The sea gas sails up to it, connects to the ferry with thermally insulated hoses, and pumps LNG into it. It's pretty obvious that the refueling process has started because the pipes connecting the sea gas and the Viking Grace have immediately been covered with heavy frost. It takes 45 minutes to fuel the ferry. After that, the sea gas separates. The sea gas has done what it was supposed to do. It may now sail away, and the world's largest gas ferry starts its 10-hour Baltic Sea cruise from the Swedish city of Stockholm to the Finnish city of Turku. And here they are, 2 cryogenic containers located in the after part of the ferry. Each contains 200 cubic meters of LNG. The purpose of these containers is to maintain temperature, but not pressure, as ultra-cooled methane is indeed a more compact way to store methane compared to compressed gas.
Now tell me, how all the system works.
Here you can see the bunkering stations. We are using the bunker stations for filling the tanks with LNG, that's liquefied natural gas. And then when we have the gas in liquid form in the tanks, we will vaporize it in the tank room and use it in the engines. Common diesel engines running on gas, natural gas. And these 4 engines are producing electricity. They each have 1 generator and they are producing 6.6 kV electricity. And this electricity we are using for the propulsion, for example. We have 2 electrical motors that are driving the propellers.
But why do everything this way? And there's a simple answer. For the purposes of economic efficiency and ecology. Such vessels emit less pollutants than diesel ones. And definitely there is a money issue. Methane is cheaper than conventional marine fuel. Ferry passengers hardly think about that, though. It is just a pleasure or business trip for them. Leaving it, they do not even realize that they were just on the largest and most eco-friendly gas vessel in the world. But which types of transports can use methane aside from ships? Practically any type of transport. For example, they built a gas-powered locomotive in Russia, and it runs on liquefied natural gas. And here it is, the GT1, a gas turbine locomotive fueled with liquid methane. Not only is it a unique locomotive, but it's also a record breaker. It is officially recognized as the most powerful locomotive with individual traction in the world. It pulled a cargo train with a weight of 16,000 tons. The train had 170 rail cars. Its length exceeded 2 kilometers. In the vicinity of Yekaterinburg, there is a mini plant to liquefy methane and produce the complicated LNG fuel. We have already seen how the refueling ship approached the ferry, but this is different with the gas locomotive. On the contrary, it has to run to a place where it is refueled several times a week. This section of the locomotive is called the booster. It holds a cryogenic container, the very same thermally insulated tank where LNG is pumped into and kept. And this section is called the motor. You can easily guess from its name that this is the place where liquefied natural gas turns into energy. It is very similar to the fueling of the gas ferry. Thermally insulated hoses are connected to the locomotive. The pumping of LNG starts. It lasts slightly over an hour. In the future, they plan to install detachable thermally insulated tanks on board such gas turbine locomotives. This will allow delivering full tanks to stations where locomotives are located to simply replace the empty ones. The locomotive sets off the next day after it has been refueled. The engine system of the gas turbine locomotive resembles the one installed at the ferry, although it is a little different. LNG is heated, turns into gas, and its volume increases. It gets into the turbine. After that, the adjacent generator produces electric current, and this allows the vehicle to move. You can tell its power and strength just from the noise made by the turbine located behind your back. But what if we talk about uneven terrain or long trains, then what? In such cases, the power capacity of the locomotive may be used to its full extent. We are now running trains with cargo weight of 8,000 to 9,000 tons, and the locomotive easily copes with the task. At present, the locomotive performs its journey several times a week, with a distance of 160 kilometers. However, this is rather a test vehicle. It is used to test new equipment. At the same time, it's not an ordinary locomotive, which means that it properly draws trains. And it does not look peculiar, not for a specialist, at least. Well, we've arrived. How did you like it? Well, unlike you, I have nothing to compare it with. But it was very unusual, at the least. It is probably no coincidence that the first ever internal combustion engine was running on methane gas. There is a huge variety of automobile power units at the moment, but every one of them will take a back seat sooner or later, giving way for something new, probably something that has yet to be invented. However, gas engine fuel is now an appropriate alternative to gasoline and diesel fuel, at least because it is cheaper and more environmentally friendly. And we are not talking about some global change of the existing conditions on the sales market. Everything has already been invented long ago, and it works perfectly. All that remains is for us to make one small step.